My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Wednesday, February 20th, 2008, and I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma, interviewing Bernice Mitchell. This interview is being conducted as part of the inductees of the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame Oral History Project. Bernice Mitchell was inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame in 1995. Actively involved in politics, Mrs. Mitchell was the first African-American woman elected to the Board of County Commissioners for Payne County, where she served 10 years. She currently serves on the Oklahoma Commission on the Status for Women, along with the Board of Directors for the National Association of Commissions for Women. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I wasn't sure if your term expired on the National Commission.
Well, I'm up for re-election this year.
Okay.
I'm completing, you run for every 2 years. Almost like the House, the legislative House seats where you have to run for 2 years. And this is my year to run for re-election. And I'm serving on the nominations committee. So I suppose in a way it would be easy to maybe find somebody to slide in there if I wanted to step down, but I'm gonna file for re-election. It really takes 2 years to figure out what's going on, to get your feet wet, so to speak. And I've enjoyed meeting people from all over. That's always been my forte, though. I just love meeting people, and the more the merrier, and from the many different places, that's even better.
Well, we'll get into your work within politics and the commission. But first, let's learn a little more about you. Give us a little background on where you grew up in your early life.
Okay, I grew up in New Orleans, attending elementary and secondary and high school, and graduating from high school there. And I think back sometime on what did I do before reaching high school, and in a sense that's a little bit of a blur. I know I was involved in a lot of things at high school, or while I was in high school. At the time, now I think it's called like the leadership group, but for us, because I went to an all-black school, it was through the YWCA or the YMCA that we were able to get into programs like that. And I was what they called a Y teen, and had leadership roles with that. And I was in the dramatics club. Maybe that just says I like acting, I don't know. But or I can be a ham when I need to be, I guess. I was involved in what we called then our readers group. And one of the things that we did was to work with the kids that were in lower grades than we were, kind of thing, just to mentor them along. And that I love doing to this day. The grandkids get that particular part of me, though. While in high school, when everybody's thinking about going to college, I knew there was no way that my parents could afford to pay or send me to college. So a very good, has since turned out to be a very good mentor and friend, was a counselor there, and she just simply said to me, okay, so you don't go now, you can go later. And I took that to heart. I graduated from high school and then went to business college for 2 years, going at night and working in the day to kind of pay my own way, with the idea being that once I completed that and got a good job, then I of course could pay my way through college. But we had a little bit of an interference there, and that means I finished the business college and started working at Xavier University. And a fellow came along, or had been along, because now we found out, and we discovered this some time ago, but that we were in first grade together. So we have been together for a long, long time. We did not, however, start dating, quasi-dating, until our senior year in high school. And with him going to college, he went to Xavier. I just figured, well, that's the end of that. I am on my own and I need to really make my own way. But instead, he, in his senior year at Xavier, he asked me to marry him, and I did, and kind of like the rest is history. So that made me put the education part on hold. I knew that he was headed for many great and wonderful things because he definitely wanted to go to graduate school in biochemistry. So, and it was like, whoever gives me, as a graduate student, I'm sure you can probably understand that. Whoever wants me and will, pay, that's where I'll go. And so Michigan State came calling one day, and the next day Ohio State, but we'd already accepted Michigan State, so off we went to Lansing, Michigan. Stayed there for 6 years, and at the end of, with him wrapping up his PhD, it was, again, where do we go from here? And his major prof had a very good friend here, a working or research buddy here at OSU. And they talked about it. We never came to Stillwater to see what it looked like or worry about housing or anything, because the professor on this end supposedly took care of all of that. And he accepted a research position here for 2 years. And we thought, we can live any place for 2 years. So, with 3 kids and pulling a U-Haul, we arrived in Stillwater, America on January 2nd of 1967. And I don't know, even on the way here, I kept asking, where are we going and where are you taking me and my kids? It was just so rural, for having lived in New Orleans and then Lansing, Michigan, which in a sense are very similar. But I don't know. And I guess for about 6 months, I kept asking that same question. Now, why are we here? But with 3 kids, and of course, 2 of them school age, you don't have much time to sit around and worry about that, because kids being kids will get involved or want to get involved in things, and I sure didn't want to hold them back, saying, well, we're going to be here 2 years, so let's wait. And consequently, it's a good thing I didn't, because as they got involved in things, so did I. And at the end of the 2 years, he was offered a position with the biochemistry department and accepted it. And so then we said, well, what's 3 more years? And after that second time, though, we figured this was it. We've made a home here. The kids are involved. I started getting involved, and when my youngest one started to school full time, I decided now it's time for me to go back to school. And so I did, part-time at first, because I had to try and manipulate several schedules there. But then it dawned on me, after talking with my professor, who advised me in a lot of things, and is a dear friend to this day, that if I was serious about it and would concentrate on it, I could really go ahead and finish up. I thought, okay, let's do that. And along that trail, I guess, I started noticing some women, all of us somewhat close in age, all had families, who would come in for lunch into the cafeteria about the same time. And so we would chat, and pretty soon we got to calling ourselves the Lunch Bunch. And then we would find that it would really help because many of us were at different stages along the way. Some were maybe a year ahead, some were maybe a year behind, some were graduate students, and what it turned out to be really was more of a, not necessarily a griping session, but a venting kind of thing, because we didn't have someone or some office that you could go to as a older returning student to sort of talk about all these things. So it really became quite a nice luncheon clash. To some of them that had had a course could also say, well, I would suggest this and this. The outcome of that, in our, I guess, knowing where to go and complain at times, became what's now called, or was a couple of years ago, the OSU Women's Council. We would go, we had someone see us sitting around talking one day, and our group kept getting larger and larger, and pretty soon some of the women faculty would see us, and several of them would have one or two of us in their class. And so I said, what's going on here? And we would tell them, and they'd say, well, you know, we need to do something about that. And eventually this somehow got to the office of the vice president, who at that time was Dr. Boggs. And he had an assistant, Shayla Avery, working for him, who said, let's do more than just sit around and talk. Let's kind of put this on another level. And so then we started having, you know, real big group sessions involving the students and the faculty, female faculty, and even had retreats where we'd go down to the city and, you know, for a weekend, just kind of, in a sense, lock ourselves in a room and just debate all this and talk about it and see what we could kind of get as a plan. And so, as I said, that from that, and I guess that kind of reminds me of the old cliche from the Acorns Grow Big Trees, because it really astonished me that just about the time that I graduated, which was in '78, that group was beginning to actually have a name and a presence of the Women's Council on campus. And so I'd like to think that maybe I had a little bit of something to do with that. And it has, you know, bloomed into I don't know what now, but I was given their first Outstanding Alumna Award. And so that really made me proud, because, you know, it seemed like all I did was sit around with a group and we'd gripe and we'd discuss, and we even got to the point where, if necessary, we'd take out paper and, you know, make notes and put them up so everybody could see, have our own little workshop kind of thing. When I graduated, I had worked in the campaign of someone who worked here but was running or saying that he was going to file and be for the position of district judge. And I worked in his campaign and he was successful. And so he said, now when you graduate, you come up and see me. I don't know if we'll have anything available, but come up and see me if you'd like to get into the judicial kind of work area. So I did. I decided I was just going to go up and see how he was doing. And as luck would have it, the person who was his bailiff at that time had decided to leave. And he said, you know, if you would like that. And I just said yes. I did not know what all was entailed in it. I did not know what the pay was. And that did not matter to me. I was just so proud of the fact that here I had just gotten a degree, and my degree was in humanistic studies, or at least that's what they called it at that time. I guess now it's humanities, and I had that was my major. My minor was sociology, and I that was I guess for me, and from my rather meager beginnings, and I'm sure it's still true with kids today, when you can walk in after graduation and have a job, that's wonderful. It doesn't matter how old you are, or anything else. So I thought, okay, this is it, and I'm so glad I did that. And probably had I been alone, maybe, with taking care of kids, I might not have accepted it because would have been so many other variables in there. But knowing that I felt secure in getting the degree and where my kids were in their life, and my husband seemed to be doing okay, I thought, why not? We'll readjust a lot of schedules if we have to, which we had to, but particularly with the kids, they found out that they could wash dishes and, clean up their rooms without mom even having to yell at them, and even, occasionally fix dinner. So that experience, I worked in the judicial system for 8 years. And I went from being the real stereotypic view of what a bailiff is. And I think most people, after seeing television and all, it was where either the little old man would come out and say, all rise, and then the judge would enter and then say, sit down. Well, that really had been the case until Judge Wall became judge, because his bailiff then was a female and I replaced a female. And what I think the whole system discovered was that women tend to be able to do a little bit more than just go in and announce the judge. They're able to at least sit at a typewriter and do a little bit of research and learn how to search cases, and we took it a step further, because while I was in his employ, he became presiding judge of the whole North Central District, and him becoming or moving to that position allowed him to have what's called an administrative assistant. And so I moved into that position, and we hired somebody else to do the quote unquote mundane, stuff of the of being a bailiff. But that experience was wonderful, because I was in touch with many, many people. I meet people today who say, you won't remember me, but I remember you because I was on jury duty and you came out and gave us the orientation, and you really worked with me because I had a difficult schedule, and so obviously there was something very positive for both of us there. After being there for about 8 years, I had a few attorneys come and say to me, how would you like to run for an office? And I said, you're kidding me, right? No, how would you like to run for county commissioner? And working in the courthouse, everybody was housed in there. The courtrooms were on the 3rd floor, and the second and first floor was where the county commissioners were. Second floor were the other county officers. So I knew what went on, and I knew the job description, I guess, of that particular position. And they started in, I guess a year before the actual term was up, just kind of prompting me and saying, we'll help you get organized, we'll help do whatever needs to be done. So I talked it over with the family, and I said, why not? Go for it. So I did. I jumped in, and I'd always had, I like to call them extended family. These are people who we've met during the years, become friends, and we would have occasionally, every other month or so, or on holidays, get-togethers. So I just pulled them all in and said, I'm going to sit down with you and talk about this. Now, while I was in the judicial system, I had become involved in what was called the Women's Political Caucus. And through that, I also, again, got on the national board. So I had learned what's involved in a campaign and what all you need and what needs to be done and on and on and on. So basically I just kind of followed ABCs of campaigning from that experience of being on the local, state, and national Women's Political Caucus. And we won that first election, not by many votes. It was only by 25, I think. Or at first, maybe it was 22. And of course, a recall was asked for, and, by right, should have been. And after the recount, we had 25. So I won that first election by 25 votes. I beat out an incumbent, female, with a no name all throughout Oklahoma. And so, I guess even there, the rest is her story. Served 2 terms there. Second time around, I had opposition, but it wasn't nearly as difficult. And of course, by then I had my feet wet quite a bit. And it was the year before, it was 95 that I got inducted into the Commission Hall of Fame. Now, I was a member of, I don't know if it was the original not Hall of Fame, but Commission, because at that time we were called the Governor's Advisory Council on the Status of Women. And I don't know how much advice we gave, and I sure don't know how much advice was taken, but this even goes back to Henry Bellmon's term. But I was very, very faithful about going to the meetings, and what we would do is get a project. And I remember one particular individual who is a judge and probably is about ready to retire as a judge now, Jan Driving, took on pay equity. The issues that were most important around the time that from school through my service in the judiciary system and into being a commissioner. Feminization of poverty. These are things that right now they have so much nicer names, I think, for them, although the situation may be still the same. But we took on those kind of projects and we would turn them over to the governor. But then we learned that really, if they made it to his desk, it was a miracle. And so some of us became frustrated. And so I decided to get off of that. David Bourne was the governor at that time, and I just sent a letter and said, I need to put my energies into other things. Because we were meeting once a month, maybe even twice a month, and that meant a trip to Oklahoma City. But there was no outcome from that. It was just we'd meet, we'd talk, we'd write up a paper and present it to the governor's office, or however the rotation was there to get those kind of things. And nothing after that. So I thought I'm just going to kind of step down from that. And then there emerged another group. And this time we found out that they were a little bit more serious. Governor Walters was in by this time, and he and Angela Munson and one other legislature. Laura Boyd, who was in the House, Angela was in the Senate. They decided that we needed a little bit more teeth with the commission. So they changed the whole legal thing and made it the Oklahoma Women's Commission, or Oklahoma Commission on Status of Women. And no money, but at least we could organize, we could have a chair and co-chair and whatever else, and then really just stick with issues. So I had worked with them simply by, whenever there was a meeting or a roundtable discussion on a particular subject, healthcare was one of my biggies, I would go to those. Well, they asked for nominations into the Hall of Fame, and a bunch of my friends and extended family members got together and submitted my name. And I thought, well, that's great. I don't like talking about myself, but they did, so I gave them permission to go ahead and do it. And sure enough, in '95, I was elected in there. And the chair at that time said to me, now, by getting inducted, that means you're automatically on our advisory council. And so I need you to start coming to these meetings. And I remember saying to her, I know, there is no such thing as a free lunch. I knew that. So I expected something like this. Well, a year later, I think I was in advisory capacity for maybe a year, because in '96, I received a letter from, I lose names, but whoever was pro tem at the time, Stratton Taylor, sent me a letter and said that he would like for me to serve on the commission, and that would be for a 5-year term. So I agreed and got involved, and then I was reappointed by Cal Hobson. And this year I'm up for reappointment again there, and of course it would be Senator Morgan. And I thought, well, I might as well keep it going now. They have watched me age, so I hope it's gracefully. So, I at times feel like the grandmother of the group, but they're very gentle with me and say, well, yes, but with that role comes a lot of wisdom. So I said, okay, I'll stay on and do any way I can help you, because I do believe that we learn from history, and if we don't learn, then we repeat it. So I bring up things that may be called or may look like something else now, and yet it's the same thing, so we address it differently and go from there with it. Getting politically involved, when we moved into the house that we're living in to this day, someone came around and knocked on the door and said, we're having a precinct meeting, and it's right around the corner at my house, and we would love to have you come and be part of that. And I thought, that's great, because this kind of gets you in right at the ground, you find out what's going on. And since we'd only been in Oklahoma for 3 years by that time, it was time, to find it out. So I went, just all ears and eyes to see. That person turned out to be Dan Draper. And Dan Draper was Speaker of the House. Had no clue at the time that, what path his future would take, but I was just so glad that I went there. So from that point on, I had always been a precinct officer. I was either secretary or co-chair or chair, and kind of worked my way up that ladder. And last year, they asked me to run for county chair of Payne County Democrats, and I did. And although I didn't have opposition, I think it was a train running through there from the very beginning. It just kind of, railroaded right on through. But anyway, and this gives me experience even on another level, because it means, whereas the precinct level, you look to the county to get you information, and the county gets things from the state, and the state from the national. Well, at the county level, you're like the shepherd, over all of the herd here. And to kind of keep them going in the direction they need to go, you're part of the district, and we're in 3rd District. So it all becomes a great big balloon. But you have to be on first base at every level to know what's going on. And of course, coming up this Saturday is state convention. 4 years ago, I went to the national convention because my husband was a delegate, and I went along for a ride. I'm not going to run for a national delegate this time. He is again, so maybe if he gets it, then I'll go again. But it's the excitement at each level is overwhelming sometimes. But if you're in the know, then, and the only way to be in the know is to just jump in there and, find out things. And so that keeps me politically motivated. It keeps me politically going. I love to sit down and talk to people about what's happening. I've done many workshops on the legislative process, and I've done many workshops in training people how to run elections or how to run as a candidate. And that part I enjoy. It's watching other people get their feet wet and going from there. Of course, along the way, in each of these roles, when you say you're one thing, like being county commissioner, that did not mean just being a county commissioner. It had like a trail of 10 other things that because you are here, we need you here in order to bring all that back. So I think that's how you build up, what do you call it? I call it friendship. Some people call it clientele, I guess, followers. But all these years, I've enjoyed sitting back and watching some of the people who I thought, I had that person sitting in my den trying to tell them the ABCs of campaigning, and they went on and they were successful. So it's nice to see that they've made it to the Senate or to the House, or even as governor or as judge. And those, when you get those kind of rewards, it's really great to know somebody else. I think of it as, another chick has flown the coop kind of thing. Because I tend to, when I take something on, I become the mother of that group. And I don't know, I guess it's just me. But I jump into it and I put all of me into it. I don't just, give it use the name for my resume or anything like that without really doing the work. Because I just think we've got to, I hope many more people will stand on my shoulders and keep going up. So I did the whole gamut instead of in bits and pieces. Now I know you want different kinds of questions.
No, that's okay. That's fine. From the political angle, did you ever think when you were younger or even in high school that you would be so involved?
No, I didn't. And I guess it's because, in high school, it's great when they elect you the president of the Y Teens or the student government kind of thing. But you think, okay, where do I go from here? And I think the kids today are beginning to know, or that playing in that role or being in that position now really does help you as you get older. But for some reason it was something I wanted to do, and I had enough people tell me I could do it, so I went on and and ran with it. I guess maybe I've always been, and maybe nosy is the word for it, always wanted to find out, if so-and-so said this, number one, I want to know if it's true, and how do you prove that? So somewhere there I've had this wanting to know spirit that drives you to, if now you can go to the internet and find things out. Back in my day, you had to really kind of read the newspapers and then take that with a grain of salt, because it depended on who the person was writing the story. So I did not know that it would lead to all of this. I'm glad, but I did not, at that time anyway, foresee this type of future.
At that time, when you were growing up, what did you want to be? What did you aspire to be?
Well, then let me reset here. I grew up in a ghetto and went to an all-black school, because at that time schools were segregated. So my father and mother, neither of which finished high school. Both of them really. One was 3rd grade, the other was 5th grade, where they had to just drop out and work. So what they always said, number one, was that you will go to school and finish school. Number two, they were both domestics, or my mom was, my dad was a janitor. I guess that was a little bit more of a title. And the next thing they said to me, and you will not do this type of work. My father wrote plays and poems, and I think my daughter inherited that from him, because she's into that. But he said, you will either be a secretary or a school teacher. Those were the two positions or jobs for blacks in the day of my growing up. This was considered in the black community that you had made it. That, that was the way to go. And as it turned out, I ended up in the role of a secretary, with a little more classy stuff put with it, I guess. Going through, while I was going to business school, I worked at a YMCA, and I was the secretary there, and went to night school for business college. So when I say I really didn't know what I was going to end up being, I'm truthful about that. Because going to business college, and I thought even then that I'd arrive, and then of course we had to move, so it's kind of like you start all over again. When we were in Michigan, I did not try to seek full-time work because the ages of my kids at that time. I did work at a hospital eventually, and I worked a 3 to 11 shift because we didn't have to worry about babysitting then. Or maybe on occasion we had to worry about babysitting. But I just, I guess I was really, truly one of those who say, well, wherever I'm led, I guess, I'll try it out and see if that's the direction I'm going to go in. It really wasn't until I started attending school here that I kind of wondered, what am I supposed to be when all of this is done? And with a degree in humanities, or human relations, or whatever they're calling it now, I remember going to a couple of job fairs, and that is where I guess the age of enlightenment hit me, because I thought, oh, all of these schools are looking for, or places are looking for someone with that kind of background, because they now have what they call their H&R department. They wanted someone in there who could really work with people and find them positions, and I thought, okay, so that's, but like I said, then when I was offered that one job, I jumped at it, because at least it gave me a chance to put my learning experience to work. So one thing just kind of, and I guess it just all kept rolling and rolling and rolling, and voila,
One more question about your high school. I'd like to know the name of it and if it still exists, if you know.
Okay. It was Booker T. Washington High School, and yes, it still exists. Well, after Katrina, it does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that. But it did up until that time. And the high school was one of about maybe 6 or 7 high schools, and we had close to 300 people in our graduating class. And to graduate from a high school like that, at that time we were the cream of the crop. And there again, the things that we did in high school, or the things that we were exposed to in high school, they're all gone now. Because, for instance, our field trips involve going to listen to the symphony, or going to see an opera, or going to do this with music, or going to do this with art. There was a lot of art involved in that, and I don't think they do that these days. As a matter of fact, I know they don't. But Booker Washington, as we call it, started losing the top name over the years. And see, it was very close to the projects where I lived, so it was walking distance. Of course, in those days you walked everywhere, or you took public transportation to get to where you needed to go. And we still had Jim Crow, so if you even got on a bus or a streetcar, you had to sit behind a banner that said, for color only kind of thing. But the high school does not exist now because Katrina took care of it, and it's gone. And well, a lot of high schools are gone, and they've gradually started rebuilding, and the kids, I think, because I have a nephew who, when they went back, they had to just go wherever there was room, to make, or they had to go someplace else in another city or another state even, because some of the kids, particularly my nephew, was in Texas. That's where they went to escape. So, and really, I don't know, I'll have to ask my sister-in-law, because she was a school teacher. She's just retired from being a school teacher, as to how many of the schools survived. I don't think very many of them did. But anyway, it is not there now.
You mentioned your mother and your father. Were they very supportive growing up? Did they encourage education?
Yes, they did. And they really encouraged me. See, I was part of a second family for my father. And he would just, over and over and over, it was, you come home, you get your homework done kind of thing, because school is important. You have got to stay in school. And for his limited amount of education, that was wonderful. And the fact that he could at least write plays, put plays together. And I remember being 5 years old and being in one of his plays. And, and somehow through all of this, he's been deceased now for many, many years, we somehow did not retain any of his works. But there again, I see it in my daughter's writings. But they were very high on us going to school. Oh yes,
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I did. As I said, I was part of a second family, and my mother actually had 9 kids, but there were only 4 of us that survived. Because at that time, health care was not available to blacks. You had to, I started to say a midwife, helped my mom when I was born, and now they're kind of coming back but at that time, that was the only way, because you very rarely were allowed in hospitals. So births were always done at home. A lot of the mothers died young because they did not or could not have the aftercare kind of thing. I had 1 sister and 2 brothers. My brother and sister older than me, and 1 brother younger than me. The older brother has since died. The sister that is still alive is 11 years older than I am. So she has been a senior citizen for some time. And then my younger brother is 4 years younger than me. My sister lives in Louisiana, but in Baton Rouge, and my brother lives in Dallas. They were misplaced after Katrina also. They were both in New Orleans, but had to relocate, and decided to relocate where they are now and stay there. They're doing well, but my sister was always very ill, so she could never hold down any kind of job. Her husband was in the military, so he took very good care of her, but he died at a young age, leaving her with 3 boys. And I must say, those 3 boys, they really take care of their mom. That's somehow was instilled in them. You take care of your mother. But the other 5 siblings died in childbirth or just a little beyond. I don't think any of them made it to 1 year or 2 years old, but they would have all been older than me.
Looking back at your time at OSU, was it difficult entering college later in life for you?
Yes and no. With my husband being on campus, and knowing all the ins and outs of student admission kind of thing, I could bounce a lot off of him. So he could direct me as to where I needed to go to enroll and that type of thing. What the other part, yes, because I knew walking into a class that I probably would be looked upon, like the mother in that class, or the grandmother to maybe some of them. But that part, and then rearranging my mind, I guess, to really get in on. I love to read, so that wasn't a problem, but that reading and then retaining it and then putting it out there, with a test or something. That was always my most frightful moments, although I did well. I just, I thought, okay, then I can do this. Once you get past that first semester, and I'm sure it's probably like that for, kids even at their age today. It's frightful. And here I had 3 kids, and a husband, and I was back in school, but you learn to balance all of that. My study time, a lot of time, was just, if I just had 10 minutes someplace, I had my head in a book, because I knew that, okay, I have to be here to pick up so-and-so. This one needs to go to dance lesson. This one needs to go to softball practice. This one, so you just you struggle through it, and as you get into it, it eases up a bit. And finding other people, other women particularly, in the same situation really made it a lot easier for me.
Now, speaking of those other women, the lunch bunch, where on campus exactly did you meet? Was it the student union?
Yeah, over just a student union. See, well, we just had at that time the cafeteria, which is the food court now, and it was in that area. We would, we'd always try and find a table over in one of the corners where it would be a large enough area for us, because we were coming and going. Some, could meet at 11:30, but then they'd have their next class would come. It was come and go for a while until we all started being able to really arrange our schedules so that we could at least all be there for an hour, if not an hour and a half in some cases. And it wasn't an everyday thing, because not all of us had classes every day for, certain times. But we would when we could. So.
What a great support system.
Exactly.
Going back to the bailiff position you held, when I read that, I think of the stereotypical bailiff. And from your describing it, it seems like you did a lot more than just call the court to order. Right. Did you ever have tough positions where you actually had to settle the court down, or any run-ins, or were there other people for that, security?
No, I never did. Of course, I had a running joke with the judge. I don't know if you've been to the courthouse here or not, but the bench in the main courtroom is made of marble. It's beautiful, and it's been retained all these years, and it was one of the first of its kind. And I used to say to him, okay, this is a marble bench. If anything ever happens where we need to hide, I'm coming back there with you. Okay, we're going to get right down here. And we had that going. I think a time or two, somebody tried to, run down the stairs and escape, kind of thing. But the deputies were always there to take care of that. I know one experience I had was one trial we'd had for 2 or 3 days, and everybody was tired, so they wanted to finish it. And we said, okay, let's just stay and finish this. And it was on a Friday, and it went to like 3 a.m. in the morning. Nobody wanted to leave. We brought food in and fed them. And then we had to bring in more food and feed. But, because they just wanted to get done with that. But the sheriff had deputies that came up and made sure that all of the jurors got to their cars, and the bailiff, of course, is the last to leave, because even after the judge is gone, you've got to make sure the lights are off and this, that, and the other. And so I had extra help I had another bailiff who was from another courtroom come down and help on this one because it was a big case. And one of the deputies at that time said, "Ladies, I will walk you to your cars to make sure that you get in okay." And that, I think, is probably the most, outlandish or whatever word we want to use there as far as that whole time that I was in the judiciary system, because everything else was kind of, cut and dry. Or I do remember, though, having to take jurors, we had to rent a van, take jurors out to look at some land. And when I say land, I say land. That's all it was land, and trying to know where the boundary started and where it stopped. So that would probably go on the side of not being too interesting, but it was the case. We had to do that because the persons involved wanted jurors to see the land. So, but no, I never did have any real life-threatening moments or times where I really, roaming around in that big old building, of really feeling frightened. Because, as I said, I knew the sheriff was there and deputies were there. And they would marshal the halls, if they needed to. They would walk up and down the hall, and particularly if they knew something was going on in the courtroom. So it never got to that point for me anyway.
You described for us how you started your entry into politics with the county commission. Did you have many political mentors early on?
Yes. People that, of course, saying mentors, I think it's more like back to that support group, because once I worked on the judge's campaign and he was successful, I just felt like after that, if anyone asked me to help them, then I would do the same thing. Now I've helped a lot of people and they've been successful, but at that time, someone who could, maybe take me by the hand and guide me through it, I'd have to say no, that was all done by supporters who had that very positive attitude too, that, yes, we can do this, so let's do it, kind of thing. There were people I admired. There's always been a lack, as far as numbers goes, with females being in the political arena. That has changed considerably now, but we still have some catching up to do, and I would like to see us have more, and at whatever level.
Who do you admire in politics?
Quite a few people, as a matter of fact. When President Kennedy was killed, that kind of crushed my hope. And I remember taking my daughter at that time, who was 3 years old, and saying, "Let's go in here and say a prayer for the president. He's been hurt." And this was when we found out that, had been taken to a hospital. I admire the people, and I'm going to reach way back here, and I don't know if you even remember from New York, Bella Abzug. Bella was part of the National Women's Political Caucus and came to just about all of our meetings, always with her wonderful hats. And she always would tell us about this dream of the Supreme Court, with there being 8 women dressed in purple and 1 male suit. And so that, and I know that was her way of giving us hope. And of course she was a senator from New York. So I've always had that admiration for her. I'm just kind of jumping all over. I guess in Oklahoma, the people, Jerry Askins, who is our lieutenant governor, I really admire her, because from when she came, she was a judge, and kind of worked her way up that way. Angela Munson, who was in the Senate, and her stance that she took on health care and her determination to try and make things better. Laura Boyd, who was in the House, some females who I looked up to and called on a lot. And so I guess if I had to say, I had a mentor, because when I took on running for these offices, they were right there. They were not known as well to me then, but as they say, you were a flickering light out there in the wilderness. And so, and I admire Hillary Clinton for taking on this role. I mean, it's not easy for a woman in any position. And you learn that quickly too, because there is such a outdated, I don't know what word to use to really explain it or describe it, but there are people who figure, women are still not playing the role they're supposed to, which is to stay at home, dress up in high heels, do the cleaning, have the cooking, and have dinner ready and be very bright. This is a little aside, but just yesterday, my husband forwarded to me an article that somebody found from 1955 about what a real homemaker is. And there's the picture of, the lady in her heels and a nice dress, and hair's all done up, and makeup and jewelry, and they give you pointers of what to do. And I just really got a big kick out of it. But there are people who still, in a sense, maybe not to that extreme, but still believe you're not supposed to be in a leadership role. That's going against God and country to do that. So I admire anybody who can say, hey, I'm qualified, and so I'm gonna stick my neck out there and do it. Because if you don't stand up, and if you don't talk back and speak out, you're gonna get stepped on, So, anyway.
Now, I read in an article that you believe people who get involved in politics should also be very involved in the community.
Oh, yes. Well, that's politics. I mean, politics is homegrown. And I think if somebody's going to run for an office, then they should know something about the people for whom they are going to be representing. And you get to know people by being in different things, not just the Chamber of Commerce, although that is one group. But get into, like community action, and maybe they call that something else now. This is a group where, when I was county commissioner, we had I don't know how many counties. In the state of Oklahoma, we have 77, but this particular, I guess now it's called CODA, Central Oklahoma Office of Economic Development or something like that. And you had people who or here as an elected official, but then you had families, people representing the kids who were in Head Start, people who were representing people who had low income jobs, working with that group and working through groups that, working even through your church for that matter, depending on, where you go and what you believe. But I'm Methodist, and so we're into a lot of hands-on kinds of things. Habitat's a big group for us. We believe in also helping others, not just in our own community, but doing mission work in Bolivia and doing, and those kinds of things. Stillwater Domestic Violence Association, the Mission of Hope, know about not only about what that is, but who's involved in it, why does it exist, and how can you keep it existing, particularly if it is helping people to pull themselves up and out of whatever situation they're in. So yes, I do. I believe truly in that. And I always believed in a balance. Don't just say, well, yeah, I know this one particular thing, but I kept kind of like 3 levels that I would stay involved in. And the local was one, being involved in church was another, and then extending whatever was at the local level always had a component at the state level. So spreading it out that way to know and learn and keep learning about what's going on. I'm a firm believer in it.
When you were county commissioner, do you have any fond memories or key memories that stand out which you would like to share with us during your 10 years?
Well, I don't know about, there are some fond memories, but it was a fight for me, an uphill fight, even with my other 2 commissioners when I was a county commissioner. The way we're set up here in Oklahoma or in Payne County, you have 3 commissioners, 2 that are called road commissioner and 1 that's called the courthouse commissioner. And the reason for that is because District 2, there are no roads as such to maintain. Because that's just all right in the city. And of course the city does that. The other 2 commissioners come from east and west. So they have rural roads to maintain. And I just had knockdown, drag out fights with, my other 2 commissioners at the beginning because they did not think this was fair and they wanted to change it and all of that. And it was a learning process again. It was a learning how to work together. As a board, we represent the entire county. We forget about which district we're from. We all had to agree or disagree on, if we needed a piece of machinery or if we needed this, that, or the other. And I think, though, that was kind of, a mindset that they brought to the position. And then being a black woman, I even had that part to overcome. But, I just, you don't want to really cross me with that kind of thing because then I dig in my heels and, I'm ready to fight too. And I basically just simply said, well, I won this just like you did, and so we're working together. And it took, I would say probably first 3 years to kind of work through that. It was, if it wasn't one thing, it was something else. So consequently, I got to be the rep from the county on a lot of boards because they didn't want to do it, they didn't have the time, so to speak. And any little thing that came up that they needed, but here again, it was a great learning experience for me because it was at a time when we were looking at converting buildings to meet the standards of the ADA.
Mhm.
So that fell into my lap. It was a time when we were looking at safety, and we needed safety directives. We needed to use a video and a booklet and go out and train people so that we don't have accidents. So that fell into my, it was like anything that they didn't want to do fell into my lap. But I didn't argue, I just took it and ran with it, and said, okay, I can do this. So I did. Eventually, when I ran for re-election to county commissioner level, I think they, at that time, they knew that, well, this next, it's either going to make a breaker. And of course, I had opposition there, but yeah, I don't like beating my own drum, but the opposition was very minimal. And it was somebody who they just said, you do it, you run against her. We'll try to, get her out there. And of course, bless his heart, he got beaten pretty badly, but it was a challenge. It really was. But yet, some of the good things that I can remember is the fact that I became a role model then for a lot of kids. The kids at Head Start would come down and visit me, even when we'd be having a meeting or so. The developers and all, I started learning then how they get into these subdivisions and do what they need to do, and how they get all this measured, and what the county role was in that. So when I decided to leave the county commission and run for a House seat, they begged me not to go. So I thought by that time that, I did it. It took a long time in a sense, but at least I was persistent and did it. And I think when they said to me, we understand that this higher office is calling you, but we're really going to miss you. Now that was something that I wanted to capture and in print and put, and then make it in stone and save it. But,
could we get that on recording?
But some of the funness of it was the fact that you got to work with all the other county officers too. You had to say so on, in a sense, the yay or nay for something they wanted to do, even though individually they ran their office. It was still up to the Board of County Commissioners to okay whatever was going on. So, and that didn't make me feel like I, had all this power. It just made me want to know them more, want to know the work that went on in their offices, and consequently, when I stood up to talk about the county, then I could kind of rattle off, what it's all about, that working together kind of thing. So if there is any fondness, it's that part more than anything else, for me anyway.
Can you go into a moment up to this point within the various roles you've held that you consider one of your biggest highlights? And if you have a few, that's okay too. You could share those.
In the political arena, or just my life in.
Well, why don't you do both?
Okay.
Because your experience in the political arena, I'm sure there's a good one there. So I don't want to limit you. So let's do both.
Okay. Highlights. Highlights for me, I think, is probably having someone say to you that the work you did was amazing, and here's a thank you. Rather, if that's a card, if it's a plaque, if it's getting inducted, to the Hall of Fame kind of thing. The highlight that I really there are a couple, but one, when I was county commissioner and I mentioned about Action, being on the board of Action Inc., I chaired the regional board, and that was probably the most rewarding thing, because you took people from the local level, you added them to the region, and then there was also a state and national component to that. And this is the group that worked with low income. It worked with Head Start. It worked with people who, all they want to do is go to work, go home, be with their family, make their paycheck, make it through the month, and then turn around and start all over again. But yet, the fact that they had a seat at the decision table meant more to them than anything, and that somebody was there listening to them, to whatever it was they wanted to say. If they wanted to complain, they knew by me listening to them, I would at least take that to the next place that I needed to go to try and work through what that complaint really was about and see if we couldn't come to some kind of compromise on it. I think the other one was, I used to, I was trying to remember what the title was. We've changed things around so much. But Committee on Social Concerns in my church. And I chaired that committee for some time. And so what I did, in order for them to kind of understand other people, for each of the days where there was a month celebration on this, that, or the other, I started putting displays together. And I would have one in January for Martin Luther King, in February for Black Heritage, in April for Native American, and in September for Hispanic. And I did this for my local church, just to help the members there. Well, word got out to some other churches, and so they then wanted me to start sharing that. Well, and my conference, the Oklahoma Conference of the United Methodist Church, honored me, had me put up my displays, and then they gave me an award. And I don't remember what the name at the time was, but it was like their Human Relations Award. For doing that, because it helped bring about an understanding of the lives of other people, where they were from. And I made poster boards. I would just get pictures out of magazines of different people and put on there and what it was that they had become famous for, or the mere fact that they'd become famous because they appeared in the magazine. And then I would add to it, when it was Black Heritage Month, I I would bring out the things that I had, my baskets from Africa, my jewelry from Africa, some of the things that we had collected ourselves or people had given us. And for the same for the others. We have lots of Native American stuff. And I always, would fight to let people know that they were the first Americans. Forget about all this other stuff about this land is our land kind of thing. Think about the first Americans. And same for the Hispanic Heritage Month. And in March, March was is Women's Month. So I did one on women's history, and would bring out the women that a lot of people did not know the role they had played in. So that was that one. And then for my work with the National Women's Political Caucus, within that group, I was second vice chair on the national board. But I also took on being the chair of the Black Caucus made up in this whole balloon here. And we would put on educational workshops within the time frame of when we had a national meeting. Or we put on, have a film festival. You can't assume that because somebody belongs to a group that they know about everybody that's a part of that group. So I just took it on myself to educate folks and brought the group along. And so there was always a time for the different caucuses to meet. And we'd take on having something on, maybe on health and the effect of this, that, or the other in the Black community kind of thing. We'd always do an educational thing. And I think over the time they've given me 2 plaques thanking me. And that's how I look at that. It's somebody saying thank you for taking this on. Not something just to, hang on the wall, because I've run out of room with some of my stuff. But so that kind of is the, what I remember as being highlighted moments. And then when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, because I just thought, my gosh, there are just so many women.
Well, what was going through your mind when they notified you were going to be inducted?
Well, see, the way they did it then, they notified me that, the forms, were sent out. And at that time, what they would do is simply say, you're one of the finalists. So you go with that, and the main thing is going to be such and such a day or evening or whatever, and it's going to be here, and but you did not know until you got there. Now, saying one of the finalists, you didn't know if that was one of 5 or one of 10 or one of what. And this was at Central State. I still call it Central. It's UCO, I guess, University of Central. Because George and I had said that we could, all of our artifacts and things from the Hall of Fame could be housed there. And this is where we had the banquet the night before, or the induction ceremony the night before, and then the next day we had a workshop all day long on different topics that were of interest to this group. So I'm sitting there with my family, and also then it was a price tag attached to it, because you had to buy a ticket to go. We don't do that anymore, but at that time we did. And I think I had like 3 tables because there were just so many people who wanted to go. They didn't care what it cost. They wanted to be there for me. And I really, this is where that support group thing really pays off. And they, of course, they did it in alphabetical order. Well, I think there were 5 of us or 7 of us in that year. Maybe there was 7 of us. And my name's Mitchell, so everybody else had been called, and then it was Mitchell, and then it was Donna and I. So she really was the last one. But you're sitting there and you're thinking, no, wait a minute, why would they say you're a finalist? And I had no idea, because I did not know how that was structured at that time. If, being a finalist of 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 or what. But I was chosen. When they told me they were going to nominate me, I sort of felt the same way. I said, oh gosh, there are just so many other people there who's probably done so much more than me. And, and that's fine if I don't get it. It's kind of like with the Academy Awards that say, being nominated is okay too. But I might say I was most delighted when they did call my name.
Did you have presenters back then? Did someone present you?
Well, yes and no. They tried to make sure that the person or people who had nominated you were invited, but they did it all. They didn't have them come up, and they just pulled pieces from whatever they had sent in. And, when I found out that, I guess they sent in, that many things, there were different people. And, my dear friend, Judy, took this on. And she got letters from everybody that she knew I had done something for or whatever and sent it in. But she knows how to do that, Now I've learned over the years of what it takes, and because usually I'm one of the commissioners who help decide of the next crew that's gonna be inducted. But it was overwhelming, because I kept saying, I know there are people who've done so much more than I have, and when they called my name, I just kind of melted, Oh, okay.
Well, what does this type of honor mean to you?
Well, it means that somebody has taken time to look at the things that I've done or been involved with, and felt that they were meaningful enough. And this is their way of saying, this is how we're going to say thank you. That's what it means to me. It means that you don't stop, you continue, you do even more. It's like this honor that I received last month from here in the city. Outstanding leader of the city of Stillwater. It says, thank you for all you've done in the past, and thank you for what we know you will do in the future, kind of thing. It spurs you on. It motivates you to even do more if that's possible. So that's what that means to me. And with the induction in the Hall of Fame, as I said, I knew then that it meant getting out there and really getting involved in not only the work of the commission, but, get an issue. And mine has always been health. I was trying to think of how older women health and elder care or something like that, how the title of the particular topical committee that I'm women's health, I guess, mental and physical, and then elder care is attached to that. You start getting into these age groups, and you need to know what's out there to help you with some of this stuff. But health has always been one of my big issues, because there's so many people. Well, health affects everybody, and there's so many people who do not have access to health care. They cannot afford insurance, and you just see this day after day after day, even in the times that we're living in now. So that has always been one of my main issues, and so that's what I jumped into from that one. With the church thing, and getting an award at the conference level meant that, so it wasn't just my local congregation that learned from this. A lot of others did too. That's, and that's what that award meant to me at that time. So anyhow, all of these just simply say to me, we've been watching, and thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you will do. So that's kind of the way I look at it anyway.
Now, you've mentored many folks over the years, especially in the political arena. How do you feel that now people look at you as that role model?
Well, yeah. I enjoy it, and I think in a sense it's a blessing. I really do, that the people at the state level always call me Miss Bernice. And I remember some women in my community when I was a child that we would call Miss So-and-so. And that meant usually that it was because they took on the leadership role in church. And the people who do this now, it's in the political arena. And as I had one young woman say the other day, as she was introducing me to somebody else, she said, "Don't you know Miss Bernice? She's been around forever." And I thought, well, maybe not forever, but she said, "She knows everything." I thought, okay, if that's how you want to spin it, that's okay. But, I felt overjoyed to hear her say that, because I knew what she was saying. And then to take this on and introduce me to somebody else that way, just, made me feel proud to know that she felt this way. And I've had even some of the young women from OSU, particularly some of the black women who have gone on, gotten their PhDs, and now working elsewhere, who will call up and say, "You may not have known this, but you were my mentor," or "I look up to the things you did, and will in my life, do some things very similar, although they may be called something else." So it makes you feel proud to know that you've carried these women, and that they do look up to you. And now, as I said, they've gotten their wings, and they're flying. And so I just hope that, knowing that that perhaps they stood on my shoulders, makes me proud of the shoulders I had to stand on to get to where I am, and how I admire all of the people who did, somewhere along the way, kind of give me a hand up.
Would you like to mention anyone or say any words about the people who have helped play an important role in your life?
Well, I I guess first and foremost, it's my parents who told me that, that I had to keep doing things in order that I would not end up doing the things they did, and I know that meant in the work arena. Secondly, I guess would probably be my husband, who said to me way back when, a man of quality is not threatened by equality, so you do what you feel you need to do, and has always been there to support me in that, and even to the point where, some people will, once in a while, will get into some kind of group and he'll go in one direction, and then somebody will have the audacity to say, your husband's doing such and such, so I'm sure that's where you are. And if he hears them, he'll turn around and say, "Oh no, let me school you about this." We each have our minds, own minds, and we each do things separately that we want to do. We don't necessarily trot along just because. And of course, this was, an elderly gentleman, and he just felt that, I was going to follow my husband. It didn't matter, but in thought, word, and deed, and we schooled him pretty quickly that, and my kids have always been very supportive, and it's even kind of nice once in a while when they say, Mom, I guess I didn't fall far from the tree, and my daughter, who is a single parent and has gone back to school, gotten her degree, and is now here in graduate school, and every once in a while, and involved in all of this, and I'll say sometimes, I think you're taking on a little too much. And she'll say, Mom, how can you say that to me? But I said, well, yeah, the situation's a little bit different here, kind of thing. So that having that kind of support has really meant more to me than anything. And then to have people at the governor's level or at the lieutenant governor's level, David Walters means the world to me, because when he was governor, the secretary would come in. I was a commissioner. The secretary would come in and say, you have a phone call from the governor's office. And I think, okay, they obviously are going to be in Stillwater, or they're going to something. So I'd pick up the phone, and, and I'd say, this is Commissioner Mitchell. And he'd say, Commissioner Mitchell, this is Governor Walters. And I need you to be on this committee. And he did that about 3 times, And each time he'd say, I need you. And to have the governor say that to you, you're going to say yes before you even know what it is he's putting you on. And he'd always say, I need more of you. So therefore, it's got to be you until you get me some more women commissioners or whatever. But I need you on this committee. And then he'd call me back and say, I need you also on this one. Now, I know I just had you on the other one, but I need you on this one too. So that will always, always stand out as one of what do you say, highest, I guess, moments. But if you know David Walters, he's very personable, and he gets to know you, and that's it. He looks down his list and says, okay, we've got a woman here, or we've got a African American here, and you get those two combined in one, and he runs with it. And he had a saying that, I want to make sure that my administration looks like the people of Oklahoma. And he did this with just, all the whole time that he was in there. And to this day, he'll call me up and say, Bernice, we need to do such and such a thing. Okay, well, you tell me when and where, and but I feel the same way that I could do the same thing. I could call him and say, Governor Walters, I need you to do this, that, and the other, and know that he will respond in kind. So, but that is a highlight, especially for the state of Oklahoma. At the national level, I think the day that I met Bill Clinton before he was even president will stick out in my mind, because at that time he was chair of the DNC, Democratic National Commission, and I was on the National Women's Political Caucus board, and we had him come in to do a speech, and he just sat down kind of like we are sitting here talking. There were about 5 or 6 of us on this particular committee that he spoke to before he talked to the larger group. And it was like, okay, so what's going on in your world? And I thought, here this man is, can't say that about too many others that that became or are now former presidents. And so those are some of the highlights. And I think back about the saying, you're on a path and you come to a fork in the road, and which way do you go? And so you take the path less traveled, because that means you've got to open up some doors there for some other people. But I've been impressed with a lot of other people that are not necessarily in the political arena. There's Robert Henry, who is now on the 10th Circuit Court, I guess, of Appeals for the district. And he was just named that, I think, last month. I remember when he ran for, I think it was AG here at the state level, that I had a coffee for him at my house, just to have him come in there. And he is, and I met him through Angie Debo, because he is such a fan of hers, but I had Angie Debo in my house. She came up to do a couple of classes one time that I was taking, and so I said, we knew her through an entirely different part. We knew because she and my husband were on the ACLU board, and so she would either come to Stillwater or would go and pick her up. And so Angie, just sitting and listening to her, she did a lot for me, knowing that as we used to call us, a tough old gal. She'd call it like it was, and then just keep on trotting. Hannah Atkins, who has now moved away, but she played a very special role in my life, because she was someone I could look up to and strive to help fill those shoes. Once she retired, she's now living in another state, but these are my mentors anyway, or people who I knew that I could look up to, and at the same time I could go to them and ask them things, or clarify things, or just to simply say, your presence today was truly a blessing for me.
Well, do you consider yourself Oklahoman?
Well, at this point, I do. I've lived here longer than I lived in my native land. Although there always will be people who probably never ever think of you as Native unless you were born here. But at this point, I do. Because I think I've walked on the hot colds, and and I've gotten blisters from trying to work with people, like working with the soil kind of thing. And I suppose I would tell them, number one is to simply, be yourself to begin with. And then if you've figured out what you really want to do in life, then go for it. There are going to be bumps. There are going to be hills and valleys, but stay with it. Just, persevere. And kind of like an old spiritual, can't nobody turn me around kind of thing. Get on that journey and just, go for it. Stay in there and do what has to be done, but do it legally.
That's the key.
That's right.
Legally.
Do it legally.
Now, for women who want to follow your steps in the political arena, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, in today's world, their burden's a little bit lighter because they have been those that have already been out there. So instead of having to do 5 miles, maybe they have 2.5. It's always going to be a little harder for women. It doesn't matter what office they're running for or what they're attempting to do, simply because for some reason the old saying of a woman's place won't die off. So then you take it and you just run with it. A woman's place is anywhere she wants to be, and you might have to step on some hands and toes getting there, but do it. Just make sure you have your ducks in a row, or have your I's dotted and T's crossed. It's not fair, but make sure it's done anyway, or make sure you have the answers to questions. And if you don't, make sure you know where to go to find them. Because people are going to throw everything they possibly can at you. And if you're not prepared, then you're going to get walloped. So I guess be prepared, which I guess is an old Boy Scout motto, can also be a Girl Scout motto. Just say, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And just have all those things ready for backup, because even in today's world, we're still going to need it. And the fact that you have to be smarter, that's okay, because you are. You know it. Just have your answers ready, and go with the flow.
When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
Oh, history's going to be written. Probably that she tried and gave her very best. And hopefully that was accomplished. Simple as that.
What's next on the agenda for you? You stay pretty busy.
Well, and that is about all right now that I can handle. I am not going to look at running for office. I will do everything I can to help others. And if that means sitting down at the table with them and working out plans for them and helping in their campaigns, then that is what I will do. But you reach a certain age and where you simply think, it's time to pass the gavel, pass the mantle, pass the whatever, even pass the plate probably. It's just, there are so many bright young people that are coming of age to take on some of this, and I'm happy to help them do it.
And finally, is there anything you'd like to mention that we have not spoken about today?
Probably 2 o'clock in the morning I will think of something, but right now we've touched on it. I think I am grateful, and I'm wonderfully grateful that I am living at a time that I am, to be able to see, because history will be made, or is being made. The fact that we have a woman running for president, we have a black male running for president, and we have a senior citizen, in a sense, running for president. So I don't know for sure if history will be made if the senior citizen wins. I think we've had others, although I think they were younger when they actually won and maybe attained the age that he is, while they were in office. But this is a wonderful time to be alive and to be witnessing this type of thing. So, and some of the changes that I've seen come about has just been marvelous to say that, if anything, I had a little part in making that history, making that become history. And I think we've covered just about everything we possibly can. I don't remember being a baby, so I can't give you that part of me. I can only start from what I did.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us today. We do appreciate it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. As I said, I don't usually like talking about myself, but when we get into the way you conducted it, that's fine. That's okay.
Thank you very much.